Welcome to a new video of the series TypeScript Tips. On this video in particular, you are going to see how to declare a type for an event dispatcher, starting with a basic and limited implementation and ending with an advanced and fully typed version. To start, let's create a basic event dispatcher type declaration. To do it, let's add an interface. Let me name it events dispatcher, and it will contain two methods. The first one, use it to subscribe to events. That it is not going to return anything, so the return type is going to be void. And the second method is going to be used to trigger the events. Let's call it dispatch, and it is not going to return anything, so the return type is going to be void. Now let's try to add the parameters for those methods. In both methods, the first parameter is going to be the event name, the event that a callback is going to be subscribed for the case of the on method, and the event that is expected to be dispatched. So let's add it here. Event name, type string, and the same applies for the dispatch method. Now in the case of on method, the second argument is going to be the callback to be executed whenever the event gets dispatched. So let's add a parameter callback, and the type must be a function that doesn't need to return anything. So let's declare a type callback here. This type doesn't exist. Let's create it above. Type callback. It's going to be a function that doesn't return anything, and that function can receive any number of arguments. So let's add that here, args. That's it. The method on is now ready, and let's complete the dispatch method, which after the first argument it will allow to pass any number of arguments, which are those arguments are going to be passed to the callbacks. So it needs to be as flexible as the callbacks for all the events can be. So let's specify any number of arguments of any type, and this is a very basic implementation of an event dispatcher type. Let's try now to use the created event dispatcher type. I will create a variable here. Let my dispatcher. It will be, of course, of events dispatcher type. By default, we are not going to add any value. Of course, in a real world implementation, you will need to assign some kind of value here. But for now, for the purpose of this video, it is not necessary. Let's assume we have an actual event dispatcher here, and now we can say my dispatcher dot on. As you can see, you can get code completion here, so it's very nice. If you have a modern IDE, you can work with this. Let's just subscribe to an event, and then we need to pass the event name, first argument. Let's say event 1, and then we need to pass a function. In this case, I'm using an arrow function, and that's it. That's all. Let's say we decide not to pass because we make a mistake or whatever reason we have. We decide to pass something that is not a function, 23 in this case. As you can see, the IDE is highlighting the line and saying, hey, you can't pass 23 and if you put the mouse over, you will get that 2023 doesn't match with the type callback, which it is basically a function. So we already have some control here. You cannot pass anything. So let's pass a function as expected. Okay, let's now try the other method, which is dispatch. My dispatcher dot dispatch. As with the one above, you need to pass as first argument the event 1, and then you need to pass any number of arguments you want. It can be of any type. The problem with this implementation is that there is no way to control whether right arguments are being passed for one particular event, or if the callback passed when subscribing to the event is expecting the right arguments. For example, someone might declare the callback as receiving the first argument, let's say first arg type string. This at runtime, this is not going to work because the first argument passed here is a number, and here it is expecting a string. So there is no way with this implementation to control this type of problems, and that is the problem I will try to show you how to solve. That is the idea of this video. So uh, this is one of the problems we want to solve, and the other is not to allow to listen or to dispatch an event that doesn't exist. I mean, that's another problem. Maybe you are subscribing to an event that was miswritten here for some reason. It was not event 1 and it was event 2. So that kind of problems, I think they can be solved, and let's deal with that. To solve those problems, it is necessary to have a mechanism to specify which is the set of events available and the callbacks those events are going to have. So how to do it, the way I have found to do it is to create an interface. In this case, we are going to name it my events, and it will contain all events name as method names in the interface declaration. Let's have the first one will be my first event, and the callback is going to be just a function that doesn't return anything because it is a callback and it is not expected to receive any arguments. So that's it. This is going to be the events contract. And how do we restrict the implementation not to allow to pass any string here on or on dispatch, but only to allow to pass my first event? Well, to do it, let's use this as a generic type. My events, of course, an error is thrown because we didn't change the implementation yet of events dispatcher. Let's do it. Let's specify here a generic type t events, and the error is, we don't have the error anymore, but still the event 1 is allowed, so we didn't finish yet. Let's now restrict the values that can be passed here in the event name. And how do we do that? Let's create a generic type here, e, that will be the type of the event name, e. And now let's restrict e only to allow having values that are declared as properties types on the passed interface. In this case, my events, but it could be anything. So let's say, how do we say that? Let's say extend e must extends key of t events. So that's it. Now, as you can see below here, even one is not allowed. It cannot be passed. If we remove this value, well, let's say, let's look at the warning error. It says event one is not assignable to parameter of type my first event. He's suggesting what is the right value you can pass there. Let's use the code completion of the IDE, and you can see it suggests the right value. So let's try to add a new event to the contract. Let's name it my second event, and if we delete here and we hit code completion, we'll get the two possible values. So by using this, we make sure that no one is going to be subscribing to an event that doesn't exist. And to do the same for the dispatch event, it's just to copy this and paste it just below and change this. So it's practically the same. And now, as you can see on the dispatch, you are getting the error. So from now on, no one is going to be able to dispatch an event that doesn't exist, or to subscribe to an event that doesn't exist. So this solves the first of the problems we were mentioning earlier. Let's now solve the problem of having having the right values passed as part of dispatch event. Here, in this case, we should not be allowed to pass any value, because for my first event there is no argument expected. In this case, two arguments are passed. So let's make the changes to get an error here, and make sure right values are passed. So how to do it? Well, first thing is we need to somehow obtain the types of each argument specified on the type of one event. This is the type of the event. We need to get the type of each argument. In this case, there is no arguments, but in case they were, how to obtain those values? Well, one way is to use built-in type parameters. This is a special type that comes with Typescript, so we don't need to create it. And it expects a generic type, which is going to be a function, needs to be a function. In this case, we are going to say T events on E. E is the event that is expected to be dispatched. So, and T events for this particular example is my event. So what we are saying is I want to obtain the parameters for the event X, in this case my first event, of the events contract my events. So we're getting an error here. I will talk a little bit about it now, but basically this is the idea. The error we are getting, it's because parameters is expecting to receive a function always. So but in this case, it is possible that someone comes to the contract on my events and say my invalid event if of type number. This is valid on the interface, but this value cannot be passed to parameters, and the IDE recognize that this can happen. So to make sure that doesn't happen, that my events can only be used if all the attributes are of type function, is to restrict here the type that is passed as a generic type. So how to do it? Let's create a type here above. Type event contract validation. No, it's going to be a generic type that receives events, and the value will look like the following. I will explain it just in a second. Let's say here that Okay, well, we are saying here that for a given set of events, let's put here T events, for a given contract, all keys in that contract must be a callback, which is a function. So if we here on the interface, we make sure that T event follows this restriction, then this is going to work. We are going to stop having this error. And how do we do that? How do we do it? It's just to extend events. Let's copy this. T events, and that's it. As you can see, the error is not shown anymore, and here below there is an error because we are passing, as you can see here, the error says expected one argument but got 3. So one argument is mandatory because it's the event name, so we are forced to remove these values from here. Let's now try to make my first event to receive some kind of parameter. Let's put a, it's a number. No, we get an error again because a number needs to be passed, and let's pass 23 and the error disappears. If you try to pass a string, then an error shows up again. So we have control over the arguments that are passed whenever an event is dispatched. So this is it. So far we have a completely implemented event dispatcher. Well, not the implementation, only the types definition. The implementation, I will not detail on that because it's like any other dispatcher. The implementation just need to implement this interface. It can be a class that implements this interface, and of course you will be forced to follow this method's signature, but that's it. With this mechanism, you are going to be safer when implementing events in any application. So it's my recommendation. It is the solution I came up with, which is working for me. If you have questions, please leave it in the comments. I will try to answer as soon as possible. Thumbs up if you liked the video, and thank you very much for watching.